The phone rang at 2:47 in the morning, and before Detective Elizabeth Whitfield even answered it, she already knew something was wrong. A mother always knows. She grabbed it on the second ring, her heart slamming against her ribs before the officer on the other end even finished his sentence. "Elizabeth, your son's bedroom window is open, and he's not in the house." 6-year-old Jade was gone. Elizabeth was on her feet before the call ended, pulling on her jacket with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, her badge clattering to the floor and her service weapon already in her grip. She had spent 4 years as a single mother building a life for her son out of double shifts, missed birthdays she made up for later, and a promise she whispered to him every single night. "Nothing will ever hurt you while I'm breathing now." In the space of one phone call, that promise had a crack running straight through it. 3 hours after that phone call, Elizabeth was standing in a ballroom, dripping in chandelier light, wearing a borrowed emerald gown instead of her uniform, an earpiece hidden beneath her curled hair. She wasn't there as a mother. She was there as Detective Whitfield, undercover, closing in on the only lead that connected to her son's disappearance, a black market trafficking ring hiding behind the glittering charity gala of Coal Industries, one of the most powerful companies in the country. Her partner, Reyes, had traced ransom-style communications back to an account linked to tonight's guest list. Somewhere in this room was the answer to where Jade was. Elizabeth didn't have hours. She had a countdown clock in her chest that never stopped ticking. That was when Nathaniel Cole found her. He was exactly the kind of man magazine covers were built for, sharp-jawed, dressed in a black tux that fit like it had been poured onto him, fair skin catching the gold light, dark eyes that missed nothing. Nathaniel Cole had inherited a fortune and multiplied it, and underneath the charm and the easy, teasing smile was a man who had learned a long time ago that humor was armor, that if you made people laugh before they could hurt you, they never got close enough to try. "You're new," he said, appearing at her elbow with 2 champagne flutes, offering her one like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I know every face in this room, miss." "Elizabeth," she said, taking the glass without drinking from it, her eyes scanning the room over his shoulder. "And I could say the same about you. Aren't billionaires supposed to be boring? Golf, yachts, more golf?" Something flickered in his eyes, surprised delight. "See, most people flatter me in the first 30 seconds. You insulted my hobbies. I like that. Dangerous, but I like it. Careful, Mr. Cole. Dangerous is a word you'll want to take back later." She meant it as nothing more than a distraction, a way to keep moving through the crowd. But there was something unsettling about how easily he read her, how his eyes narrowed slightly, like he'd noticed the tension coiled beneath her calm. Before she could excuse herself, a security alarm shattered the music. Across the ballroom, a display case had been shattered, a decoy, planted by Elizabeth's own team to draw out the trafficker's contact. And in the chaos of screaming guests and rushing security, Nathaniel Cole grabbed the nearest person moving fast toward the exit and pinned her wrist behind her back. It was Elizabeth. "I've got her," he shouted to his head of security, adrenaline and instinct overriding thought, certain he'd caught the thief responsible for the chaos. "Call the police." "I am the police," Elizabeth hissed, twisting against a grip stronger than she expected, her cover unraveling in front of 200 witnesses and, somewhere out there in the dark, whoever was holding her son. "Let go of me. You have no idea what you're." "Nice try," Nathaniel said, breathless, half lawing in disbelief at his own catch, snapping a zip-tie cuff from a security guard around her wrists before she could stop him. I've heard better lies from board members trying to cover a bad quarter. By the time Elizabeth's badge fell out of her clutch and skidded across the marble floor, the damage was already done. Nathaniel stared down at the gold shield, at her furious, terrified eyes, and understood in one gut-dropping second that he had just handcuffed a police detective in front of half the city's elite, live-streamed by 3 different society bloggers. "You're a cop," he said slowly. "Detective," Elizabeth snapped, yanking her wrists free the second the cuff loosened, rubbing the raw skin beneath. "And while you were busy playing hero for the cameras, you just cost me the only lead I had on finding my 6-year-old son." The words landed like a slap, Nathaniel's easy charm dropped away entirely, replaced by something Elizabeth hadn't expected to see on a man like him. Real, unguarded alarm. Your son is missing. Since 1 o'clock this morning. And the man responsible is somewhere in this building. And thanks to you, he now knows exactly who I am. Across the room, half hidden near the terrace doors, a man in a charcoal suit slipped out into the night. Calm, unhurried, watching Elizabeth with the flat, assessing gaze of someone recalculating a plan. His name was Victor Kane, Coal Industries' chief financial officer, a man Nathaniel had trusted with the keys to his empire for 6 years. Nobody noticed him leave. Nobody except Elizabeth, whose eyes locked onto him for one fraction of a second before he vanished into the dark. That was the first clue. It would not be the last. Nathaniel didn't hesitate. Whatever armor of charm and jokes he wore for the world, it cracked wide open at the mention of a missing child. Tell me everything, he said, already pulling her toward a private study off the main hall, away from the cameras and the whispering crowd. Right now, every detail. Why would I trust you? You just had me in handcuffs. Because, he said, and for the first time all night his voice had no performance in it at all. I know exactly what it feels like to lose someone and have no power to stop it. And because whoever's behind this may be closer to me than either of us wants to believe. For the first time since the phone call that had shattered her night, Elizabeth let herself hope that this infuriating, quick-tongued stranger might actually be telling the truth. In the private study, surrounded by shelves of first-edition books Nathaniel had never read and awards he'd never bothered framing himself, Elizabeth laid out what little she knew. A ransom note demanding she drop an ongoing investigation into stolen shipment routes. Routes, she now realized with a cold jolt, that ran directly through Coal Industries' logistics division, Victor Kane's division. Nathaniel went pale beneath the golden light. Victor's been handling overseas freight contracts for 3 years. I trusted him with everything. If he's involved in this, then he's using your company as cover to traffic something a lot more valuable than cargo. Elizabeth finished grimly. And he just found out I'm onto him. The next 4 hours blurred together. Nathaniel using his private security team and his own resources in ways the police department's red tape never allowed. Pulling shipping manifests, financial records, encrypted server logs. Working beside her at a pace that matched her own desperation stride for stride. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, exhausted and running on nothing but adrenaline and coffee gone cold, they found themselves sitting shoulder to shoulder on the study floor, papers spread out around them like a battlefield map. You're not what I expected, Elizabeth admitted quietly, the fight drained out of her voice. Let me guess, you expected someone shallow, overconfident, allergic to real feelings, something like that. He gave a tired half-smile, the real one, not the practiced one he wore for cameras. My father built this company by never letting anyone see him bleed. I learned to do the same thing, just, apparently, with better jokes than he had. It's easier to make people laugh than to let them see you're scared. And are you? Scared? His eyes met hers, steady despite the exhaustion, terrified. For your son. And if I'm honest, a little bit for myself. Because somewhere in the last 4 hours I stopped thinking of you as a case I accidentally created, and started thinking of you as someone I very badly don't want to lose. The air between them went taut and warm all at once, the kind of moment that under any other circumstance might have ended in something soft and slow, until Elizabeth's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and every ounce of warmth in the room turned to ice. You're getting close, detective. Close enough that I have to move up my timeline. You have until sunrise. Come alone, or your son doesn't see another one. Attached was a photograph. Jade, blindfolded, sitting on a concrete floor in a room Elizabeth didn't recognize. Elizabeth was on her feet in an instant, her training fighting against the raw panic clawing up her throat. I have to go. Alone, that's what he said. That's what he wants you to think, Nathaniel said, standing to block her path, all trace of humor gone. Elizabeth, look at this photo again. Look at the background. That's not some abandoned warehouse. That tile, that lighting, I've seen it before. That's the sub-basement of Coal Tower. He's hiding your son in my own building. The realization hit them both at the same moment. Victor Kane hadn't just used coal industries as cover for trafficking. He'd been arrogant enough, confident enough in his years of loyalty and trust, to hide a kidnapped child 2 floors beneath Nathaniel's own office. "If we go through the front, security will alert him the second we badge in," Nathaniel said, already moving, pulling a spare set of keys from a locked drawer. "But I built that tower. I know a way in that isn't on any blueprint Victor's ever seen. Why would you do this?" Elizabeth asked as they ran for the door, disbelief cutting through her fear for just a second. "You don't owe me anything. You don't even know me." Nathaniel paused just long enough to look at her, and the answer in his eyes needed no words at all, though he gave them anyway, quiet and certain. "I think I've been waiting my whole life to meet someone worth risking everything for. Turns out it took you getting arrested by mistake for me to find her. It should not have been romantic. It was reckless and terrifying, and entirely the wrong time. And yet, for one heartbeat in the middle of the worst night of her life, Elizabeth felt something unclench in her chest that had been tight since the day Jade's father walked out and never looked back. They reached Cole Tower just as the sky began to bruise purple at the edges, dawn creeping in like a warning. Through a service corridor Nathaniel hadn't used since he was a teenager sneaking into his father's office after hours, they made their way down, past humming server rooms and silent hallways, toward the sub-basement Victor Kane had turned into his own private prison. They were 3 floors down when the lights cut out completely, plunging the stairwell into total darkness, and a voice, calm and almost amused, echoed up from below. "I was wondering how long it would take you two to figure it out." Victor Kane's flashlight clicked on, illuminating his face from below in a way that turned his familiar, boardroom-polished features into something far more unsettling. Behind him, chained to a support pillar, 6-year-old Jade lifted his blindfolded face toward the sound of his mother's voice. "Mom?" His small voice cracked through the dark, and Elizabeth's entire world narrowed down to that single word. "Let him go, Victor," Nathaniel said, stepping forward, his voice steady, despite the tremor Elizabeth could feel radiating off him. "This is between you and me. He's a child." "He's leverage," Victor said simply, as if explaining a spreadsheet formula rather than a human life. "For 3 years I moved product through your shipping lanes, and you never once looked closely enough to notice. Because you trusted me, Nathaniel. You trusted me the way rich men always trust the people who make their lives easier. And then Detective Whitfield's investigation got too close, so I needed insurance." "You're finished," Elizabeth said, forcing steel into her voice even as every instinct screamed at her to run to her son. "The second we walk out of here, every federal agency in this city is coming down on you. If you walk out of here," Victor said, and raised the gun in his other hand, pointing it not at Elizabeth, but at Nathaniel. "See, I've already transferred what I need offshore. All that's left is making sure neither of you survives to testify. And honestly, Nathaniel, having you take the fall for this entire operation was always the backup plan. Dead men make excellent scapegoats." Time slowed to something thick and unbearable. Elizabeth's hand moved instinctively toward the service weapon strapped beneath her borrowed gown, and in the half-second it took Victor's finger to tighten on the trigger. Nathaniel Cole, billionaire, charmer, a man who had spent his whole life avoiding real risk, threw himself directly between the gun and the woman he'd known for less than 12 hours. The gunshot cracked through the concrete stairwell like the end of the world. The bullet caught Nathaniel high in the shoulder, spinning him back against the wall with a sound that tore straight through Elizabeth's chest. But the half-second of chaos was exactly what she needed. Her weapon was already up, already level, and she put every ounce of her police training into a single clean shot that struck Victor Kane's arm and sent his gun clattering across the concrete floor. What happened next moved fast. Elizabeth disarming Victor completely, zip-cuffing his wrists with the same brutal efficiency she used on every arrest, ignoring his snarled threats about lawyers and lawsuits as she shoved him against the wall he'd used to imprison a child. She freed Jade with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, pulling her son into her arms so tightly he gasped, both of them sobbing into each other's shoulders in a way that had nothing performative and everything real in it. But when she turned back, Nathaniel had slid down the wall, blood soaking through his tuxedo jacket, his face gone gray, and for the first time all night, the sharp, witty billionaire who used humor as armor had nothing left to hide behind it all. "Hey," he said weakly, managing something that was almost his usual grin even now. "For the record, worth it. Don't you dare," Elizabeth said fiercely, pressing her hands hard against the wound, her voice cracking down the middle. "Don't you dare make jokes right now. Stay with me. Jade, baby. Call 911. Tell them the address. Tell them exactly what I taught you." Her son, shaking but steady, did exactly as he was told, his small voice reciting the address with the calm clarity of a child who had grown up watching his mother handle crises with grace, even when her hands were shaking. "You didn't have to do that," Elizabeth whispered, tears cutting clean lines through the makeup on her face as she held pressure against Nathaniel's shoulder, willing him to stay awake, stay present, stay alive. "You barely know us. I told you," Nathaniel murmured, his eyes fighting to stay open, finding hers in the dim emergency lighting that had finally flickered back on. "I've spent my whole life protecting a company. Tonight I finally understood what it means to protect something that actually matters." Paramedics arrived 9 minutes later, the longest 9 minutes of Elizabeth's life, and as they loaded Nathaniel onto a stretcher, his hand found hers and held on, refusing to let go even as they wheeled him toward the ambulance, even as the world dissolved into flashing lights and shouted procedure, and Victor Kane being hauled away in handcuffs of his own. 3 weeks later, Cole Tower's rooftop garden was quiet in the golden hour before sunset, string lights just beginning to flicker on above rows of blooming jasmine. Nathaniel's arm was still in a sling, a visible reminder of the night that had rearranged both their lives. But the color had returned to his face, along with the easy, teasing smile Elizabeth had come to recognize as entirely, uniquely his. Victor Kane's trial was already underway, federal agents having unraveled a trafficking network spanning 3 states, all of it traced back through the financial trail Nathaniel had handed over without hesitation. Even knowing what exposure it would mean for his company's reputation, he'd rebuilt Cole Industries from the wreckage with the same stubbornness he'd once used to avoid feeling anything real. Except now, that stubbornness had a purpose behind it that went beyond profit margins. Jade sat at a small table nearby, carefully arranging a plate of cookies with the serious concentration only a 6-year-old could bring to snack distribution, occasionally glancing up at Nathaniel with the open, easy trust of a child who had decided, in the way children sometimes simply know things adults overthink, that this particular billionaire was one of the good ones. "You know," Nathaniel said, settling beside Elizabeth at the railing, careful of his healing shoulder. "When I signed up to host that gala, I was expecting a boring night of small talk and forced smiles. I was not expecting to get shot, fall for a police detective, and adopt an honorary sidekick who now beats me at chess 4 times out of 5. "You let him win," Elizabeth said, smiling despite herself. "The first 2 times. He's beaten me fair and square since." Nathaniel turned to face her fully, and whatever armor of jokes still lingered fell away entirely, the way it had that night in the stairwell when nothing else was left to hide behind. "Elizabeth, I've spent my whole life keeping people at a distance because it was safer than needing anyone. You walked into my world in handcuffs I put on you by mistake, and somehow you're the first thing I've ever been completely certain about." "You arrested me," Elizabeth reminded him, but there was no bite left in it, only warmth. "Best mistake I ever made," he said, and when he kissed her, slow and certain against the backdrop of a city finally settling into peace, it felt less like the end of a terrifying chapter, and more like the first real page of something neither of them had let themselves hope for in a very long time. Jade, watching from the table with a cookie halfway to his mouth, grinned and called out, "Does this mean I get a dad who has a whole tower?" And for the first time in longer than Elizabeth could remember, she laughed with her whole chest, no fear left underneath it. Real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to stand in front of danger for someone you've barely had time to love, and choosing it anyway. Elizabeth spent years believing she had to carry every weight alone to be strong. Nathaniel spent years believing vulnerability was a weakness he couldn't afford. It took one impossible night to teach them both that the bravest thing either of them ever did was let someone else carry the weight beside them. Sometimes the family you fight for isn't the one you were born into. It's the one you find in the middle of your darkest night and choose to hold on to for good.